Anti-Afro Spengalis. Here's a question that was posed, and I think it's only fair that I answer it. Came in the comment section from Ray the Barber. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say the name. And the comment appeared under the video, link is below, where I had announced KKC's live stream. And I just made a few minutes of comment. And I referenced Umar Johnson and Kwame Brown. Check out that link so I don't have to rehash that. So this person responded to the video. And here's his question. Am I just trying to start trouble? Why would Kwame Brown bring up Umar Johnson? That's a very good question. For those who are not on top of it, or for people who choose to ignore what we know is very much relevant. Remember when I stated, do not panic, do not fret. Umar Johnson going on the Breakfast Club again, which would be for the 5th time, would be something that the anti-fraud warriors and affiliates would be able to capitalize on. People were outraged. Initially, I tried to not even deal with it, but I saw how people were getting more and more upset, and I realized, you know what? Yes, this is pissing me off too. But I see a silver lining. So my anger decreased, and I said, sit and wait. We will have a chance. And voila, Charlamagne runs and opens up his mouth. And I didn't even know Charlamagne was involved. I was actually doing sports blogging, talking about the Green Bay Packers situation, quarterback situation. And Charlamagne's name came up. I'm like, wait a minute. Charlamagne. And the comments were moving really fast. And I looked again, and then more people started making comments about Charlamagne. Charlamagne, the cease and desist. That's what I call him. And that comes from the lead attorney. You should check out his YouTube page. It's fascinating. He's an attorney from Georgia. He covers all of the latest controversial issues. And I love the way he explains just down straight to the nitty-gritty, and he integrates the legal issues. Check out his channel. But he came up with the Charlamagne cease and desist nickname, and I'll get into that in a second. So I'm like, what is going on? And people started posting more information about what was happening. There had already been something going on, which is common in sports. The journalists go back and forth with the players. Kwame Brown is not new. He has been in the sports world for 2 decades. He's been, posting videos, but he hasn't come out the way he has now against these commentators making their remarks about him, calling him a bust. He was the #1 drafted. He played on the top teams and had injury-prone career and eventually retired to a farm in South Carolina, raising his family. What the hell? I don't get that. People ragging on somebody like this. But at any rate, the situation took a turn for the worst. Not necessarily initially with the sportscasters, because he handled them. It's when Charlamagne opened up his mouth and said what he never should have said. And is anybody surprised that Charlamagne ran his mouth? But this time, he could not be saved by a letter from his attorney telling Kwame Brown to be quiet. That wasn't going to work. Charlamagne took it somewhere else and went digging into the brother's family history. And I don't really think he had much digging to do, because Charlamagne, as much as he doesn't like to own it, he's from the South. So it wouldn't have taken very much to probably ask somebody in the community about Kwame Brown's family. It was so out of line because he was basically stating, along with Angela Yee and DJ Envy, that Kwame Brown is violent based on the fact that relatives had been arrested for violent offenses that he wasn't even raised with. So it went all out, people. It was so over the top how Charlamagne got involved. And then when Kwame Brown came back at him, Charlamagne cease and desist, decides to go get an attorney and try to shut up Kwame Brown, because Kwame Brown brought up the case, the indictment that Charlamagne underwent for raping a 15-year-old. He, however, pled down. The indictment was for raping a 15-year-old. That's what it was. Nobody can sue you for saying that. There's court documents there. And nobody can sue you for saying, I think you did it. Nobody. But we know those charges will not be revived because Charlamagne took a deal. And he's up here coming for Kwame Brown, and Kwame Brown let him have it. Open the floodgates. We've been complaining about this for years. We've been complaining about the Breakfast Con show as well. And it was even worse when they brought Umar on. So it's the floodgates are open now. Kwame Brown is getting all of this focus. We're talking about 33,000 people in his live streams. And people also piled on to Charlamagne, because as much as I do not agree with reviving a case after a plea has been signed, sealed, and delivered, I don't support that. I don't support the fact that Bill Cosby had a civil suit and there was an agreement he wouldn't be charged criminally. For the court to renege on that, I think that's garbage. It doesn't matter what I think about whether or not Bill Cosby did what he has been convicted of, because that case is now before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. At this point, it doesn't even matter whether or not I think Charlamagne actually did rape the 15-year-old. I can have my personal opinion all day long. A deal is a deal. But with Charlamagne, it's what he's done after that's getting my attention. He has shown he didn't learn a damn thing from what happened, because he's gone on to talk about drugging women, who he, by the way, calls girls. Isn't that interesting? But with Charlamagne, it's what he's done after that's getting my attention. He has shown he didn't learn a damn thing from what happened, because he's gone on to talk about drugging women, including his own wife. These are Charlamagne's own words. You cannot come after people for repeating your words. If you don't want people repeating your words, shut the hell up. And he was trying to shut up Kwame Brown because Kwame Brown went to town on his ass. So enter Umar Johnson, not on your life. You all have been looking. You've been searching high and low. And Umar has shut the hell up. He has been silently existing in terror that Kwame Brown doesn't come for him. And you had damn well better believe that's exactly what's going to happen if he jumps up and tries to defend Charlamagne, the cease and desist. That's my point. Now, the person says, am I trying to start trouble? I was in the chat. Kwame Brown's, well, he has lots of chats. Okay. I was in many of his live streams, like several anti-fraud warriors and affiliates were. We were actually greeting each other. Have I made a serious effort to get Kwame Brown's attention? No, I haven't. I have left messages in the live stream like everybody else. What I would really like for Kwame Brown to follow through on, if he needs certain situations handled, and I am talking verbally, because there have been several women coming for him. He has mentioned a few and gently corrected them. Let me say this. There have been women who have given their views and opinion that don't agree with him. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people are sensitive to that. And since he's from the South, I'm telling you, he's probably more likely to be hypersensitive to that. There is nothing wrong with disagreeing. Every single thing that comes out of someone's mouth you're going to agree with? No. People, come on, let's be realistic. But I'll tell you what I look at. Whatever issue I can tack onto that can help put the spotlight on what I would like to see on the spotlight, that's where I'm going with this, people. He is talking about his sisters coming on board and addressing the issues. Angela Yee needs to be taken to task because she sits up there. Not only did she accuse Kwame Brown of being violent. She sits there and allows Charlamagne cease and desist and this DJ Envy to say whatever the hell they want about women. She doesn't defend women, and they still want black folks tuning into their show. I think that is freaking garbage. And yes, many people would like to see the Breakfast Con show gone. I'm one of them. I have never watched that show. I will never watch that show. They have the donkey of the day where you pretty much have mainly black folks on the show. So every day you're going to be calling a black person a donkey. Of course, the show is run by white folks and they just do whatever the hell the white folks tell them to do. A lot of people have issues with that. But now, when Charlamagne opened up his mouth and was talking about family history, that Kwame Brown said his child didn't even know, his 16-year-old son had no idea. And some of the things Kwame Brown didn't even know. Where the hell do you get off, Charlamagne, coming about someone's family in this manner? And this was a sports issue. Comment on sports. One thing I will say, I am not a big fan of Stephen A. Smith because he's all up in this too. The rule is you leave families out. Relatively few times do you see sportscasters coming for people's families. I know, and sports fans, you see family members jumping down on the field and making comments. They even come for the sportscasters, and they have to show restraint. No matter what someone's relative says about a sportscaster, that sportscaster can't be unloading on a relative. Are you serious? So typically the athlete is able to get to the relative and tell them to pipe it down because fans are going to get pissed off, but the sportscasters are supposed to show restraint. And when they do not, they get dinged for that. They get suspended, they get fined, and some get fired. So Charlamagne was so far out of line. What the hell? He was trying to use a situation to gain an advantage, and he thought that the community and this Breakfast Club, quote, fan base was going to support him and step to Kwame Brown. Just the opposite, because the lead attorney was talking about, even though you may know something, don't forget there were millions of people who had no idea that Charlamagne, the cease and desist, have this case. The Breakfast Club is not that big of a show. I think their was it their weekly views or their weekly ratings? I think 4 million people. The top shows get 20 million a week. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big show. But when Kwame Brown came on and started saying the things that he was saying, and the one thing I'm so glad he took Charlamagne, the cease and desist, to task for, is that his behavior was so out of whack when it's compared to how you do things in the South. I know people want to come on me and say something. You just don't do these things. Decent people don't do these things, but especially you're coming from the same state and really not that far from each other, and you are coming for someone's family and digging in someone's past, and you think you can put it on the airwaves and no one's going to come for you. So Charlamagne broke all kinds of protocol, thinking that he was going to be protected by the white folks on Breakfast Club. If this doesn't stop, let's see what happens. Is there going to be a push to get this Breakfast Con show off the air? People are saying they want the show off the air. And Kwame Brown is not the only one coming for Charlamagne to cease and desist. You have folks coming up and they're just triggered in so many ways about this situation with this 15-year-old, although the case cannot be revived. Yes, Umar Johnson is a potential casualty. That's going to be up to Umar Johnson. Am I going to put all of my effort into try and get Kwame Brown's attention so he can focus on Umar Johnson? No, that is not my style. I do want to wait to see if the sisters come on board. And if they do, I'll use that route, because this has to be addressed, people. It has to be addressed. Umar Johnson cannot continue doing what he is doing. And the fact that Charlamagne, the cease and desist, keeps bigging him up is unacceptable. Well, I guess we kind of should not be surprised because Umar Johnson's attitudes towards sexual assault, towards rape, towards child molestation, are Umar Johnson and Charlamagne any different from each other? I don't think so. I do not think so. Umar Johnson calls rape victims hot asses and says they got raped because they were running after older men as grown women in college and hanging out with frat boys. So they deserve to be raped. He calls molestation victims thoughts. That hoe over there. And Charlamagne posts accusations of raping a 15-year-old and giving a 15-year-old alcohol to the point where she was incapacitated. He got a plea on that, but since then he talks about drugging women who he calls girls, including his wife, adult females he was dating. He talked about beating a girlfriend because she apparently had sex with someone else. So you beat somebody, or do you break up and move on to another relationship? Am I saying that's easy? No. You have a right to beat somebody who you say cheated on you. And then he says, every black man has put his hands on his, quote, girl. Here we go again, calling women girls. And at least choke them out or something. What the hell? This is so ridiculous. This is a person who is perpetuating the most disgusting and vile negative stereotypes about black men. Charlamagne, and he has a platform. I don't see any difference between him and Umar. Umar, however, knows better than to open up his mouth and try to come for Kwame Brown or defend Charlamagne the cease and desist. That much we know to be a fact because it hasn't happened yet. And Umar cannot tolerate any news story, any attention gathering issue to be front and center. Although he's not even on top of anything, he hates the fact that people are talking about something other than him. That's why he jumped out in front of the Kobe Bryant situation when Kobe Bryant was killed in that helicopter crash with all those other people. Umar got on and he needed to say something. The goddamn NBA is suspect. He was blaming the NBA. He needs to be on top, but he has to be dying right now because this is blown up to epic heights. Umar is probably just can't even contain himself, but he knows if he opens up his mouth and says anything about Kwame Brown is going to let the world know about the abandoned bomb shelter. It is just a matter of tick-tock time. So Umar continues to be out of the loop, suffering in silence, suffering in terror, that he can't even discuss the biggest issue in all of sports, not just Black YouTube. And that is a measure of punishment for Umar we need to relish in. Do you see the benefits we are acquiring by being patient and waiting? We know there is so much more to come. Umar did what he did and thought he had an ally in Charlamagne the cease and desist, and now Umar doesn't even have the guts to defend him. You do the math. If you had a school that you were trying to open and you weren't ripping off people, would you be more inclined to defend your so-called buddy? We know the answer is yes, but Umar Johnson is doing dirt. And he wants the dirt to stay covered with more dirt. He doesn't want the dirt pulled off, and he doesn't want you to get to the clean spaces. He wants to keep doing dirt. Let's wait and see if Umar will come out and say something. I ought to run a contest for this, people. I'm sure I should run a contest. Let me think about that. The last contest I tried to run, Umar just decided he wasn't going to say anything, and we never got a winner. I offered $300, remember? For people to say what reason Umar would give for not opening a school. And we had it within a certain timeline, and he simply just shut his mouth. And then wouldn't announce the school opening or the abandoned bomb shelter opening earlier than expected. He's listening, people. But let me think about the guidelines for a contest I can put out there. Because that $300 was never given away. And I'm serious about giving away that $300. In the meantime, people, continue to be on your P's and Q's. Buyer beware.